Go to year 12. Mr. Brown here. We're going to start a new topic today in Buddhism. So we're going to start looking at belief systems and ideologies here. I've only put 2 lessons up this week, just because they're quite, like, both of them are fairly dense. So that's why there's only 2, and obviously you should be working in your PIP each week as well. So we get stuck into it. So how this is going to work is, as we would in a normal classroom, you just want to have your books and pens out. I think it's still valuable to keep all your notes in the one place. I don't want you guys changing that up at this stage. We'll try to keep it as normal as we can. Sort of why I'm trying to do this video, so you still have me talking through it with you, because we can't meet in person at the moment. So what I want you to do at the start is, these are our syllable stop points for the day. So if you want to get those down, that would be fantastic. So we're going to basically look at today, like, what is Buddhism, how did it come about, and the sort of core beliefs and values of the belief system. So we're going to sort of look at it as the syllable stop point says here, its historical development, how it came to be, the underlying principles, so what are the main core values and beliefs of Buddhism, and then we're going to look at how that impacts identity. Okay, so what we're going to start with today is, if you go to lesson 1 worksheet, it'll look something like this. Now, you can either print this off if you've got one at home and stick it into your book and highlight it through. If you don't, do your best to, you can either copy it all down or write it in sort of dot point form. But I've summarised this from like a whole book, so you might just want to copy that down. But who is Buddha? What is Buddhism? So essentially it began in India, as we can see here, during about 6th century BCE, so about 2,500 years ago. And I think it's one of the world's most popular religions or belief systems, one of the most practiced belief systems around the world. It's sitting currently at 4th. So ahead of it you've got Christianity, the Muslim faith, and then Hinduism. So this is about 4th on that show. So it's got about 500 million followers around the world, and that equates to about 10% of the world's population. So it's a pretty big deal. A lot of people, you've probably all heard of Buddhism before. You probably have some idea of what it's about in terms of peace and things. But yeah, that's just some interesting sort of background information on it. So how it came about was, so about 2,500-ish years ago, there's a guy called Siddhartha Gautama. And he later became known as Buddha, obviously. He was born in Nepal, and he essentially grew up really wealthy. So this is a guy that later becomes Buddha. So he grew up surrounded by great wealth and opulence. Now, this is a really good word to know sort of from the syllabus. So basically that just means rich. Okay, I've written in brackets luxury here. So if you're opulent or you show opulence, you're very well off, you're very wealthy. His father, so Buddha's father at the time, was a high caste Hindu and chief of the Shakya clan. Now, when someone says of high caste, India has this sort of ranking system called castes, how they rate their society, and it's just sort of giving different people of different social statuses and backgrounds certain elements of power and authority over others. So in a nutshell, he grew up, he was pretty well off in India. He was quite rich. He was actually a prince. He was going to be, when his father died, inheriting lots of land and value. So his father raised him to be a devout Hindu, but he strayed away from that path. So at about the age of 29, he had this encounter. There's going to be a video that I'll put up that explains it a bit more. But he had this encounter outside of the temple, because he'd never actually sort of ventured outside of the palace for most of his life. So he sort of became disenchanted with opulent life. He sort of got over being rich and wanted to explore the world a bit more and experience things from the other side. So I wrote he quit his palace, because he literally did. He threw away his title, left his family, and pursued a life of asceticism. Now this, if you're writing it down, highlight it. If you've printed this off, highlight that for sure. This is a word we're going to use a lot. So what this means, or asceticism, it's sort of like giving up all your worldly possessions to sort of live a really humble kind of life. That's it in a very simplified version. But here, if we look, it's the renunciation of material possessions and physical pleasures, and time spent fasting while concentrating on the practice of religion or reflection upon spiritual matters. So a lot of you might see the skinny gurus that just drink like vegetable juice and have beards and sit on robes and meditate and kind of look like this guy. That's what asceticism is. You disregard all worldly possessions, any sort of physical pleasure or material attachment, and you just spend time fasting, so you're not eating much, and you're trying to focus all your energy on reflecting upon the world, essentially. What he found out, though, was that extreme asceticism became just as disenchanting as his former life of opulence. So he found on both sides of the scale, being extremely rich wasn't enough for him, but also that other scale of choosing to sort of, I guess, live an extremely poor life in terms of material possessions didn't help him much either. So he went in search of what he called the middle way. Highlight that'll become relevant later. So what he then did, he kept travelling and practiced under many spiritual leaders and learnt the art of meditation, which we've done. If you don't remember, we did some in year 11. And again, the sort of style of meditation is so that you're withdrawing your mind from automatic responses to sense impressions, so aka the world around you, in order to reach a state of perfect equanimity and awareness. So essentially you're trying to calm your mind to be able to think about things without feelings attached to them. You're trying to become more wise. So what ended up happening is he meditated, apparently, for 49 days straight in search of what he called the middle way, so time pondering and thinking about the meaning of life, etc. And he sat under what was called the Bodhi tree, and this is sort of an image depiction of it here. And after 49 days of meditation, so at about the age of 35, so it took him about 6 years to hit this stage, he said he gained enlightenment and became and had sort of complete insight on the world and everything, and therefore he became known as the Buddha. So that's sort of an image representation of that. After he became the Buddha, a lot of people came to him for his teachings, and he started traveling around the world teaching other people the ways that he'd found out, which we're going to look at next is the core sort of aspects of Buddhism. So that's sort of how Buddhism started. So in summary, he used to be a rich prince, became disenfranchised with that life, and decided to see what life was like on the extreme opposite end of asceticism, so renouncing all his possessions, and he found that not to be the way to go. And so he started meditating for a while to try and figure it out, and Buddhism was sort of his answer. I'll just check how much time I've got left. So after you've done that, I just want you to have a quick look at some of this key terminology here. Now this terminology, leave like a whole page in your book, because we're going to add to this a lot later, so I want you to get this down. It's really important that we know these terms. They do get you extra marks. They're considered concepts in the belief system part of the syllabus. But it's also showing that you have a deeper understanding of the content knowledge if you can name drop them to a HSC marker. So the best way we're going to learn this is through rote learning. Naturally, if we were doing face-to-face classes, I'd do sort of like a trivia thing at the start of every lesson to help you understand this. But you guys are just going to have to be in control of that for a bit. So get these down. These are terms we're going to refer to throughout the whole sort of aspect of this course. So obviously Buddha, that means, or is translated to enlightened one, or the awakened one. So that's what they call the guy who started the faith, essentially. When we hear the word Dharma, that translates to doctrine. So basically that means the teachings of the Buddha. So whenever we reference the Dharma, we're talking about the teachings of Buddha. So in Christianity, their equivalent would sort of be like the Bible. You've got the Quran for Islam. Okay, it's the similar sort of thing. The Dharma here is the teachings of Buddhism. When we refer to the Sangha, that's referring to Buddhist disciples, so the direct people under him, I suppose, in a hierarchy Buddhism, if you can imagine that, have roles of power and authority, and that's the monks and nuns. So monks are men, and nuns are women. So that's the only difference in terms of their names. But yeah, so when we're talking about disciples, the monks are the boys, nuns are the girls. Nirvana, you've probably heard this word before. So this is a state where people don't suffer, they don't have any desire or sense of self. So the subject is released from karma and samsara. So karma is, what goes around comes around. The technical definition, though, is that merit through deeds performed. So the idea that if you do good things will happen to you. If you do bad things will happen to you. Nirvana can also be seen sort of as, I'll put this in here, as enlightenment as well. Did I not spell that right? No, there we go. So samsara is what we call the cycle of rebirth. So that's where some strands of Buddhism believe that you die and you get reborn. So that's sort of what that means. Dukkha, it's a spice, but in Buddhism it's referring to pain, suffering, and evil. So anything that's bad is referred to as dukkha. And Tana is your craving, desire, and attachment. Okay, so these are sort of our key words. A lot of it's a bit information overload, but when we get into the core principles of the faith, which we're going to do in a second, that's going to make a lot more sense to you. Alright? So what I want you to do once you've done that, now remember, leave a whole page for that, is go to this worksheet here, which is again attached to Google Classroom. So I'm attempt to go through this a little bit with you. Sort of read along as you go. Remember, if you have a printer, print it out. If you don't have a printer, it is really important that all this information is in your book. So you're just going to have to do some hand stretches and write it all down. It is really important. Everything we do in this course is going to refer back to this document, so make sure you get that down. What this is, so the foundation of Buddhism is about what's called sort of the three jewels. So there's three pillars to the belief system. The first pillar, or the first jewel, which is this yellow thing here, is Buddha, the teacher. He's important because he discovered the belief system and showed people how to reach enlightenment / nirvana. Okay. The second pillar is the Dharma, which is this blue gem. And that's the teaching. That's what's referred to as the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism, the Eightfold Path, and the 5 Precepts. So that's the Dharma that underpins Buddhism, and we're going to go into that in detail here. And then lastly, the third jewel, or third pillar, is the Sangha, which is again the monks, the nuns, and they're the community of Buddhist disciples. They're living the most complete life, so that all Buddhists can seek nirvana. And the idea of, or purpose of them, is that they can help others reach enlightenment as well. So that's sort of the 3 jewels that Buddha states is required for other people to reach enlightenment as well, and to spread the knowledge about the middle way. So Buddhism is underpinned by the 4 noble truths. So these are the 4 things that Buddha discovered when he was meditating under that tree for 49 days. These are the 4 things that he became to realize are the truth. His idea is that no one can dispute these truths, no matter what your belief system is, or no matter who you are or where you come from. So under his sort of understanding, these are the 4 noble truths. Now, you probably get this perception that Buddhism is all about peace and love and happy kind of vibes, which it is. But these 4 noble truths are going to seem very opposite of that. So essentially, when trying to understand the meaning of life, I suppose, he started the middle way, and he wanted answers. He could sort of explain away everything, but he wanted answers about the cause of suffering and evil. And these 4 noble truths sort of, or the idea is that can give purpose to everyone in their life. So I'll go through them quickly here. So the first noble truth is dukkha. Life is full of pain, which leads to suffering and happiness. That's the first truth. It seems a bit grim, but that's the thing he said and thought was irrefutable. Everyone has some level of pain, suffering, and unhappiness. His examples were the pain of birth, so the mother that goes through that, sickness that every human will feel at some point, the pain of old age, loss and grief, and then eventually death. So that's the first noble truth, and that's dukkha. Now if we go back to here, remember we've got dukkha here, pain, suffering, and evil. So that's the idea that life is, and there's 2 different spellings there. There should be a H there. He wants to teach, though, that this isn't meant to be a pessimistic view of the world or a bad thing, but a pragmatic one. So pragmatic meaning practical. So what he's saying is to pretend or ignore these realities only increases your suffering. So if you're not acknowledging when you're, say, unhappy or suffering, you're just adding to the problem. So he's sort of like saying it's more of you realizing and checking in, okay, what are the things that are causing me pain and suffering, and how can I not get rid of them? Because, again, the first rule is that life is full of pain. You can never get rid of it. I know it seems a bit grim. But how can you reduce it as much as possible is sort of the pragmatic or practical view that he's taking there. So the second truth is the Tana. So that is that what's the cause of dukkha, which is pain. So Tana is looking at that craving or misplaced desire and attachment is the source of pain. So rule number 1's basically life is full of pain and suffering, and that rule number 2 is that it is misplaced desire and attachment that's the source of that pain. And that the cause of pain is found in humanity, and as a result, Buddha believed that humans have the power to change it. So you can sort of see how it sort of transitions through to each other. We then look at Nirodha. So this is the cessation, so that's just when something ceases or stopping. So if we want to try and stop pain, it comes when we stop Tana. So the ending of suffering or pain can only happen when craving and misplaced desire and attachment has ended. Okay, so until we do that, we're not going to stop having pain, I guess, is the essential rule of number 3. The end of suffering can only be found in the total resignation to the realities of life, resignation of cravings, attachment, and misplaced desires. So total resignation to the realities of life would be things like you're going to die one day. That's something that they would believe you sort of have to come to terms with or grips with. The fact that you're going to get old, the fact that you'll get sick, that you're going to experience pain. So understanding that. And then the resignation of cravings. So having misplaced desires or attachment, whether that's to people or objects. So say one thing, for example, you might notice is why monks and nuns are all bald. So they see hair as an attachment or a bodily attachment, something that can distract them from core meaning of life. So that's why they all shave their heads. So it's even little simple things like that. It doesn't have to be a huge thing like not having a phone. It can be as simple as shaving your head off. So they believe is we're the ultimate cause of our difficulties. We're also the solution. So we can't change the things that happen to us, but we can change our responses. That's a nice little handy life tip anyway. So you can't change that life is going to be full of pain and full of suffering and unhappiness, according to Buddhism, but you can change how you react to it. I hope that makes sense. So that's sort of the third truth. And then the last one, you'll overcome Tana, which is desire and attachment, by following the Eightfold Path, or the middle way. This will avoid both indulgence. So that again, that when we look back here, being rich and that opposite end of the spectrum, and it's also going to avoid severe asceticism. So that other end where he was in his life starving, didn't have a home, all that sort of thing. Buddha didn't find either of those two severe ends helpful, so it's all about sticking in that middle way, or the middle path. So that's in essence the Four Noble Truths. So it's essentially life is full of pain and suffering. The source of that pain and suffering is attachment. How to get rid of pain is to get rid of attachment. How you get rid of attachment is to follow the Eightfold Path, essentially. Okay? And this is the Eightfold Path. So it's sort of like it unfolds one after the other. And that's sort of how it works. So the Eightfold Path, you've probably seen this before. This is what's called the Wheel of Dharma. So you can see there's 8 points on the wheel here. They all represent one of the Eightfold Path. So these are sort of the rules of Buddhism, or things that they believe. And they all start with right. So the first thing, the Eightfold Path. So these are sort of things that they want you to, again, this is principle number 4. To overcome attachment, you should do this. And that will, in turn, avoid you having pain and suffering, or lessening it. Which, who wouldn't want, right? Here we go. So, Eightfold Path. First thing is the right view. So, they think that you should see things as they are, without any false illusions or pretenses. So, not making bold assumptions about things, having more of a pragmatic view of the world, not writing that narrative in your head. I don't know, I'm guilty of it sometimes. Like, I'll imagine bad things that can happen as a result of something that hasn't even happened yet. So they're more saying, well, you don't know that's happened yet. Try to see things as they are for now, and then move on. Right resolve is the second one. So we are what we are because of what we think. So our thought process determines our course of action. So therefore, if you're thinking to always do what is good and positive, then you're going to do what's good and positive. You're going to love people, you're going to be compassionate, and you're going to be practicing harmlessness. So that's sort of the idea of positive thought or positive thinking. 3, right speech. So speak the truth at all times, essentially. Don't slander anyone, avoid abusive language, and abstain from idle chatter. That's a big one. So essentially that means don't gossip. Because if it's not meaningful, they're sort of saying if every action you're doing isn't for the betterment of someone else, why would you bother doing it? Is sort of the idea there. So that's why they believe all communication should be sweet, gentle, and positive. That's probably why whenever you see depictions of monks, they're always so happy and smiling and that kind of thing. So that's why. 4 is right conduct. So actions are peaceful, with abstinence from killing, stealing, intoxication, and sexual misconduct. So we should also help others to lead a peaceful and honourable life. So the idea here is that you're not going to do anything that's going to harm anyone. You're not going to and that would include things like killing, stealing. You're not going to do anything in their mind that'll harm yourself or your own body. So things like drugs and alcohol, Buddhist monks or nuns won't participate in. And then sexual misconduct as well. So say if you're married, you're not going to cheat on your partner and that sort of thing. That's partly as well why they're vegetarian, while all monks and nuns are vegetarian, because they think very deeply about these things, as you're probably aware. So any form of killing, if they're sort of eating an animal, they would believe that they're sort of part of that process because they're accepting it by eating it. Do you know what I mean? So that's why they're vegetarian. Rule 5 is the right livelihood. So abstain from making one's living through a profession that exploits other human beings or animals, or to trade in weapons or intoxicants. So essentially making sure that your job, whatever you do, is a noble profession in their eyes. Again, this is all from their perspective. So say you were the CEO of an oil company that, digs holes in the ground and mines Earth's minerals. That would be an exploitation of the environment. So that wouldn't be a noble job. If you were, a professional boxer, for example, they probably wouldn't do that, because a lot of boxing, like sports say, would involve gambling, and it literally involves punching people in the face and harming them, and whoever does the most harm wins, sort of, in their eyes. So that, for example, wouldn't be considered part of the right livelihood. Fun fact, teachers are considered a noble profession, so how about that? That last bit there. One should live by a profession which is honourable, blameless, and innocent of harm to others, as well as yourself. I would probably add there too. Next one here is right efforts. So you want to consciously direct what they call life energy, or key energy, to the transformative path of creative and healing action that fosters wholeness. So essentially that's like things like practicing meditation, things that can help clear the mind. So they're very big in gardening, and doing just lots of positive moral acts and efforts every day. The 7th of the Eightfold Path is right mindfulness. So being aware and attentive of your own body, actions, feelings, thoughts, and ideas. So that idea that you're not just reacting based off emotion, that you're noting how you're feeling as you're feeling it, and you're acting again from a more of a pragmatic view, more from a practical view, where you're not letting those emotions sort of control you. And that last one here, right concentration. So here you're focusing to train your mind to obey you and not the other way around. So that's the whole purpose of meditation here. I don't know if you remember when we did meditation in year 11, but you might have noticed your mind was wandering, sort of thing. So the idea of the practice is that you're going to have all these wild thoughts coming in. So it's about, like how they call it here, trying to ride a wild horse without being thrown off. You sort of want to, you want to tame that horse, is the idea of it. So the more you practice meditation, that's why they meditate so much, you'll become like an observer to your mind. So you're not going to judge what you observe, you're going to observe it and stay in the present, and that'll help you focus, or the idea of it is that that'll help you focus on all these other things to do good. That idea that your brain's not in control of you, you're in control of your brain, if that makes sense. And then the last thing they have are the 5 precepts. So these are sort of like the 5 laws, I suppose. So there's no killing of humans, animals, insects of any kind. So, there's a spider in the shower or whatever, don't kill it, according to the Buddhists. There's no stealing, and that includes as well borrowing something for too long, right? So you can't just borrow something for 80 years and then give it back the day before you die, because then you're technically not stealing. So they sort of put that in there as well. No sexual misconduct, so that includes rape, obviously prostitution, even bigamy, so that's cheating on your partner, or even seducing someone for a benefit, like whatever that might be. 4, no lying. Again, that's around your language. Don't use harsh language, don't slander other people, but also exaggeration. If you exaggerate the truth or something in a story, for example, you're sort of making it bigger than it actually was, so that to them is still lying. And then no intoxicants is the last one, which, alcohol, drugs, because they're so big on this concept here, concentration and mindfulness, having you in control of your mind. Anything that disturbs or inhibits the process of your brain to function normally, they're not a fan of. So that's sort of it in a nutshell of the basic of Buddhism. I know it's a lot to take in, so just reread over everything again if you don't mind. There is one thing you can do here as well. There's a YouTube link here on slide 5, which is a cool narration of the story of the Buddha that goes into a bit more depth than here, so that's a good watch. Here I've got a revision Kahoot based off this lesson's content, but we'll do that maybe in a Zoom or something in week 3. That might be a way to go there. But that's it for this lesson. Hope you're staying safe and well. I'll see you in the next